The hallway smelled like antiseptic and money. That was the thing people never said about Kane Medical Group's flagship hospital, that wealth had its own particular scent. Sanitized, controlled, a little cold beneath the surface. Amelia Kane rolled her wheelchair through the corridor at 7:14 a.m., 46 minutes before anyone expected her. That was how she preferred it. The silence before the performance. The building before her staff painted their faces with careful, practiced deference. 31 years old, net worth approaching $4 billion. Founder and majority shareholder of the largest private hospital network on the eastern seaboard, and completely unable to feel her legs. She stopped near the nurses' station on the 4th floor and watched the morning shift begin its quiet choreography. 4 checks, medication rounds, the soft percussion of chart updates. No one had noticed her yet. That window lasted maybe 90 seconds on a good day. She had learned to use it. It was during that window that she saw him. A man in gray maintenance coveralls was crouched beside a patient who had collapsed near the elevator bay. An elderly man, maybe 70, face pale and slack, one arm trembling. The maintenance worker, tall, dark-haired, maybe mid-30s, had already positioned the man in lateral recovery. One hand pressed 2 fingers to the carotid. His lips moved silently as he counted. He wasn't panicking. He wasn't shouting for help. He was assessing. 2 nurses arrived 30 seconds later. The maintenance worker stepped aside immediately, delivered a clean, clipped report: pulse rate, estimated time of collapse, no signs of head trauma, and then became invisible again. Picked up his mop, resumed mopping, like nothing had happened. Amelia watched him for a long moment. Then she rolled forward. He was almost around the corner when her voice caught him. "Stop pretending." He froze. The words had left her mouth before she'd fully decided to say them. But she didn't take them back. She never took things back. He turned slowly. His face was controlled, the particular blankness of someone who had learned to compose themselves under pressure. Brown eyes. A jaw that held tension quietly. A small scar above his left eyebrow that looked surgical rather than accidental. "Ma'am?" His voice was steady. "That report you just gave those nurses," Amelia said. "You measured his pulse. You checked his pupils. You placed him correctly for aspiration risk." She tilted her head slightly. "That's not a mop and bucket education." Something moved across his face. Not fear, exactly. Something more layered. "I watch a lot of medical documentaries," he said. Amelia held his gaze for 3 seconds. Then she turned her wheelchair and rolled away. Behind her, she heard him exhale. His name was Ethan Cole. That much was in the employee file her assistant, Diane, pulled within the hour. Age, 34. Single father. Next of kin listed as one Lily Cole, age 7. The rest of the file was thin, in a way that felt deliberate. Previous employer, a cleaning contractor in Baltimore. Before that, a gap of 18 months, listed as self-employed, and before that nothing. The record simply stopped, as though Ethan Cole had not existed prior to 3 years ago. Amelia read the file twice. She called her head of security. "I want a full background. Not agency standard. Everything. Timeline? End of day." She closed the folder. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows of her corner office, the city moved below in its ordinary urgency. Taxes. Commuters. The small, anonymous machinery of lives being lived. She watched it without particular feeling. The file came back at 4:47 p.m., and Amelia sat with it in silence for a very long time. His real name was not a secret. It was just a name no one was looking for anymore. Dr. Ethan Cole, formerly of Johns Hopkins Department of Neurosurgery, board certified, published, regarded, at 31, as one of the most precise surgical minds his program had produced in a decade. He had been destroyed in 72 hours. The case was 7 years old. A 43-year-old state senator named Richard Goss had died on the table during what should have been a routine craniotomy. The post-operative toxicology had flagged anomalies. The hospital's internal review had concluded, within 2 weeks, that Dr. Cole had administered a contraindicated medication combination. His license was suspended pending investigation. The investigation concluded in 3 months. License permanently revoked. His wife, Claire, had left before the year was out. She had not, as far as Amelia's investigators could determine, contested custody of Lily. She had simply stopped responding. Amelia read the toxicology report twice. Then she read the internal review. Then she requested the raw case files through a medical consulting contact she trusted. The anomaly was small, easily missed if you weren't looking for it. The medication flagged in the toxicology, a beta-adrenergic compound that had interacted fatally with Senator Goss's undisclosed cardiac condition, had been recorded as administered by Dr. Cole at 11:22 a.m. But Dr. Cole's surgical notes, time-stamped and witnessed, placed him in active cranial decompression at 11:19. The surgical team had not broken scrub. You cannot administer a medication in a corridor outside the OR while your hands are inside a man's skull. Amelia set the file down very carefully. She thought about a maintenance worker crouching over a collapsed patient in a hospital corridor, pressing 2 fingers to a carotid with the quiet precision of someone who had done it 10,000 times. She thought about what it costs a person to carry that kind of knowledge. I did nothing wrong, and wake up every morning in coveralls anyway. She called Diane. Book me 15 minutes tomorrow morning. Informal, no agenda logged. With Ethan Cole. Don't tell him who requested it. She didn't hold the meeting, because at 2 to 11 a.m. the following morning, her phone rang. The after-hours line for the hospital's pediatric cardiac unit. Lily Cole had presented at the emergency department at 1:58 a.m. in acute cardiac distress. Hypoxic. Tachycardic. The attending physician had stabilized her but was recommending emergency surgical intervention for a congenital ventricular septal defect that had been managed conservatively for years. Estimated surgical cost, with post-operative care, $140,000. Ethan Cole's insurance, the basic package offered to maintenance contractors, covered 11% of that. Amelia sat in the dark of her apartment for a moment. Then she called her CFO's emergency line. Charged the Lily Cole surgical authorization to the Foundation's pediatric fund. No name on the authorization. Classify it as an anonymous donor allocation. A pause. Yes, Miss Kane. Tonight, before the morning billing cycle. She hung up. She did not go back to sleep. She sat instead, with the thing she had done, an act that was both generous and calculated, which was the only way she knew how to be generous, and she thought about a man crouching in a hospital corridor with the precision of someone who had spent a decade training his hands to do exactly that, and she thought about what it cost a person to know they could still do something they were no longer permitted to do. She knew something about that. For the first week after Lily's surgery, Amelia told herself she was simply monitoring an unusual employee situation. That was the language she used internally: monitoring, unusual. Situation, the vocabulary of a person who had learned to keep sentiment at a bureaucratic distance. She reviewed the security logs each morning. Ethan's badge records showed him arriving at 5:50 a.m. every shift and leaving at 3:30 p.m., precisely his contracted hours, not a minute over. In between, his patrol route curved, invariably, past the pediatric wing on the 5th floor. The system logged his badge swipe at the stairwell access point. 7:02 a.m., 11:14 a.m., 1:40, 7 p.m., 3 times a day, he was checking on her. Working-class hospitals, Amelia had learned in the years of building her network, operated on invisible economies: the cafeteria staff who brought extra portions to families who'd been there too long, the orderlies who remembered which patients needed the blinds opened in the morning. Ethan had become part of that economy within his first month. She had heard about it secondhand, then seen it herself. He fixed a wheelchair for an elderly woman when the maintenance request would have taken 3 days. He talked a crying child through a blood draw with the focused patience of someone who understood exactly what the child was afraid of. He never did these things for visibility. He did them the way competent people do necessary things, because they needed doing. She was watching him from the nurse's station on Tuesday, when she made a decision she didn't fully acknowledge making. She redirected his maintenance schedule, cleaned ducts on floors 2 through 4, East Wing. It would bring him past her office 3 times over the course of the morning. She was not sure what she intended to do with that. He found out 3 days after Lily's surgery. Amelia had not planned for that. She had assumed the anonymity would hold the foundation handle dozens of similar authorizations each quarter. But Ethan Cole was not a man who accepted things without understanding them. And he had apparently spent 2 of the 3 post-surgical days quietly, methodically tracing the authorization back through the hospital's billing system with a persistence that suggested he had navigated institutional bureaucracy before. He found her on a Thursday morning. She was in the East Corridor, reviewing a renovation proposal for the oncology wing. When she heard his footsteps behind her, unhurried, deliberate, "Miss Kane," she did not turn immediately. Finished the paragraph she was reading. "Mr. Cole." He came around to face her, and she noticed he was still in his coveralls, still carrying his radio on his belt, but he had washed his hands recently, the skin still faintly reddened from hot water. "The Lily Cole authorization," he said. "That was you." "Not a question. The foundation funds pediatric cardiac cases on a need-basis evaluation," Amelia said. "Your daughter's file qualified. Her file was flagged 3 months ago and denied," he said quietly. Nothing changed in her file. The only thing that changed was last Tuesday. She looked at him steadily. "The evaluation criteria are reviewed on a rolling basis." He was quiet for a moment. She watched him absorb the deflection. Weigh it. Decide not to push through it. Not here. Not directly. "Smart. Thank you," he said instead. Just that. No performance of gratitude. No escalation. No dead acknowledgement theater. She found that she preferred it. How is she recovering? Something in his face shifted, not softening exactly, but a different quality of guardedness. Like a door left unlocked, but not opened. "She's asking when she can go back to school," he said. Amelia almost smiled. "That's a good sign." He nodded. Stood for a moment, as though deciding something. Then, "You reviewed the toxicology file on Senator Goss." Her stillness was her answer. "I don't know how you accessed it," he said, "but someone flagged my ID in the legal records system yesterday. Your hospital's IP address." She had underestimated how carefully he watched things. "You weren't as careful as you thought," he said. "There was no accusation in it. Just information. Neither were the people who constructed the case against you," she said. The corridor was empty. It was early. The light through the east-facing windows was the particular pale gold of a morning not yet committed to itself. He said nothing for a long time. "What do you want?" he finally asked. "I don't know yet," she said honestly. He studied her face. Then he picked up his radio and walked back the way he had come. She watched him go. She thought, "I have not told anyone the truth about anything in 4 years. And I just told him." It started with a coincidence, or what appeared to be one. Amelia fainted in her office on a Tuesday afternoon. Not the dramatic collapse of films, but the quiet, mortifying kind. The dimming vision, the sudden absence of equilibrium, the slide sideways in her chair that she managed to prevent only by grabbing her desk hard enough to bruise her palm. She had been alone. She had intended to remain alone. But Ethan Cole had come to her floor to repair a ventilation panel, and her door had been half open, and he had seen. He did not exclaim. He did not reach for his radio to call someone. He simply crossed the room in 4 steps, checked her airway, pressed 2 fingers to her wrist, and said, "Breathe out." Slow. She breathed out. Again. She did. "Have you eaten today?" "I don't remember." He opened the cabinet behind her desk with an ease that suggested he had noticed it before, found the protein bars her assistant left there, unwrapped one, and held it out. When she didn't take it immediately, he set it on the desk in front of her and pulled back, not to give her space, but to give her dignity. The specific withdrawal of someone who understood the difference. She ate half the bar. "When did the chronic pain start?" he asked. She looked up sharply. "You favor your right arm when you wheel," he said. Your left shoulder compensates. You've been rolling with slightly uneven pressure for months. That's a secondary spinal issue, not just the primary injury. He paused. Unless the primary injury isn't what the records say it is. The room was very quiet. She could have said, "That's none of your concern." She had said it to neurologists, to board members, to journalists, to her own mother. Instead, she said, "I was told I would never walk again, after the accident." What kind of accident? A car accident. 5 years ago. At what speed? She blinked. I don't 40 miles an hour, approximately. It was an intersection collision. T-bone impact? Which side? Driver's side. He was quiet for a moment. Spinal cord injuries from lateral impacts at 40 miles an hour typically affect the cervical or upper thoracic vertebrae. Your paralysis pattern bilateral, complete below L2, is more consistent with a compressive injury. Or a surgical one. She stared at him. "I'm not a doctor," he said carefully. "Yes, you are," she said. He didn't answer that. "Someone hurt you," she said. Not a question. Not for the first time. "Someone hurt you," he replied. It was the first time someone had said it aloud in 5 years. The first time the words had existed in the air between two people as a statement of fact, rather than a melodrama to be dismissed. Amelia felt something move in her chest that she did not have a name for. She did not cry. She was very proud of that. Her eyes, however, betrayed her. Ethan looked at the window and gave her the privacy of his profile for a moment. "The medication in your post-accident records," he said quietly. "The spinal stabilizer they used in the first 48 hours of treatment. Do you remember the name?" "Verospinal," she said. "They told me it was standard protocol." He said nothing, but she saw his jaw tighten. His name was Victor Hale, Chief Operating Officer of Kane Medical Group. 15-year veteran of the company. The man who had kept the board stable during the 18 months Amelia had spent relearning how to exist after the accident. The man who had been, in every public accounting, her most loyal ally. He had an office 3 floors below hers, with a view of the courtyard. He wore suits that were expensive without being conspicuous. He was 62 years old and looked younger, and he had the particular ease of a man who had never, in his adult life, needed to hurry. This was because Victor Hale had spent 40 years arranging the world so that it never required urgency of him. He did not solve problems. He predicted them, shaped the conditions of their arrival, and ensured that by the time they became visible, he was already positioned on the correct side of them. It was not intelligence. Exactly, plenty of intelligent people never learned this particular discipline. It was patience. The cold, structural patience of someone who thought in decades rather than quarters. He had identified Amelia Kane when she was 24, a graduate student with a management consulting internship and a talent for audit work that made her supervisors uncomfortable. He had offered her capital, mentorship, introductions. He had helped her build Kane Medical Group from a single acquired hospital in Baltimore into a network of 11 facilities across 4 states. He had also, during those same years, been quietly positioning those facilities to serve his other interests. The pharmaceutical procurement contracts, the trial authorizations, the steady, lucrative flow of data from thousands of patient files anonymized, technically compliant, and sold through 3 subsidiary entities to research aggregators who did not ask too many questions about provenance. Amelia had not known. She had trusted him, and then, 7 years ago, a junior audit manager had found an anomalous prescribing cluster in the Baltimore facility's records and escalated it to Amelia's office. Amelia had pulled the thread herself, quietly, not yet certain what she was looking at. The thread had led to Hargrove Therapeutics. The thread had led to Victor. She had not gotten far enough to know that. But she had gotten far enough to make Victor nervous. The car accident had been neat. A corrupted brake system, an insurance report that found no evidence of tampering, an intersection with a malfunctioning traffic camera that had been serviced 2 days prior. Dr. Ethan Cole's connection to the case was a useful coincidence that Victor had arranged to be more than a coincidence. Ethan had been preparing to publish data on Hargrove's adverse event suppression not from the same investigation, but an independent one, pieced together during his own research on post-operative spinal care. Victor had learned about the manuscript through a colleague on Ethan's institution's ethics board. The solution to both problems had been the same. The senator's death provided the mechanism, and Victor had provided the evidence that made Ethan its cause. Ethan had been 27 years old. He had been 3 years into an extraordinary career. He had a pregnant wife and a future that looked, from the outside, like the clean forward trajectory of a man who would never need to hurry either. Victor had made a calculation. The calculation had held for 7 years. It had not accounted for a specific Tuesday morning, a maintenance worker crouching in a hospital corridor, and a woman in a wheelchair who noticed too much. Ethan had found the connection 11 days after the conversation in Amelia's office. He had been careful. Years of operating at the margins of institutional systems had made him methodical. He didn't access anything directly. He worked through public filings, through pharmaceutical licensing records, through the paper trail of a mid-tier drug company called Hargrove Therapeutics that had gone through 3 name changes in 8 years. Hargrove had manufactured Verospinal. Victor Hale had served on Hargrove's advisory board for 6 years, including the year Verospinal had been added to Kane Medical Group's standard post-trauma protocol. Victor Hale had also, 7 years ago, been on the oversight committee of the Baltimore Medical Ethics Board, the committee that had finalized Ethan's license revocation. Ethan had sat with that document for 2 hours before bringing it to Amelia. When he did, he slid a single printed page across her desk and stood back. She read it. "He was afraid of you," Ethan said. "Or afraid of what you were close to finding out. The verospinal data, the long-term spinal degeneration effects that Hargrove buried you, were auditing pharmaceutical contracts the year of your accident. I was looking for unnecessary prescribing patterns," she said. "Cost reduction. You would have found the adverse event data." She thought about a car accident at an intersection she had driven through 100 times. She thought about the specific, tidy way her injuries had been classified, managed, explained. She thought about a man who had watched her paralysis preserve his power for 5 years. "He used verospinal on me," she said. "After the accident, someone authorized a high-dose spinal intervention before you were conscious to consent. The dosage in your records is within protocol, but there's a note 1 line, partially redacted from the attending physician. He flagged the administration as atypically aggressive and was overruled." "By whom?" Ethan set a second page on the desk. Victor Hale's signature, dated 5 years ago. "He doesn't know we have this," Ethan said. "No," Amelia said. "He doesn't." She looked at the signature for a long time. "He'll find out we're looking," she said. "Probably. We should move faster than he expects." Agreed. It was the first time they had said we. Neither of them mentioned it. There were 11 days between finding the document and everything catching fire. In retrospect, Amelia would think of those days as something close to ordinary. Close to peace. She had not known that peace had a texture she would have said, before, that it was simply the absence of crisis. She learned during those 11 days that it was more specific than that. It was the presence of something unremarkable, a cup of coffee at the right temperature, an unscheduled hour, a conversation that went nowhere important, and that was, precisely because of this, entirely restful. Lily was discharged on a Friday. She was small for 7 slight-boned, with her father's brown eyes and a seriousness that was undone completely by her laugh, which was sudden and startling and whole-bodied. She had opinions about hospital food, insufficient dessert options, about the color of the pediatric ward walls. Orange was a bad choice, and she would like to speak to whoever decided that, and about Amelia, whom she assessed within 40 minutes, with the thoroughness of someone who had learned early that adults required careful evaluation before trust could be extended. "You don't talk to me like I'm sick," Lily explained. When Amelia asked what had prompted this assessment, "You're not sick," Amelia said. "You had a mechanical problem. It's been fixed. Dad says that too." Lily tilted her head. "He says the heart is just a pump. He's right. He knows a lot about hearts." A pause. Lily picked at a thread on her hospital blanket. "He cries, sometimes. When he thinks I'm sleeping." Amelia looked at the girl for a moment. 7 years old. sitting cross-legged on a hospital bed, reporting this not as a wound but as information. Evidence of care, filed as such. That means he loves you very much, Amelia said. I know, Lily said, uncomplicated. Does anyone love you that much? The question was delivered without cruelty, which made it, somehow, more difficult to absorb. Children ask things with the straightforwardness of people who had not yet learned that some questions were not supposed to be asked. Amelia thought about whether to deflect, and then thought about the girl's matter-of-fact accounting of her father's grief, and decided that deflection would be a kind of disrespect. I'm working on it, she said. Lily seemed to find this satisfactory. She returned to her thread-picking with the air of someone who had received a reasonable answer and filed it appropriately. Ethan came to the hospital on a Saturday morning, off schedule, with 2 cups of coffee. He knocked on her office door. When she said, "Come in," he handed her one of the cups and sat in the chair across from her desk without waiting to be invited the first time he had done that. Lily thinks you're secretly a princess, he said. Based on what evidence? The office. The way people talk around you. He looked at her steadily. She's not entirely wrong. I'm not a princess. No, he said. Princesses wait to be rescued. She looked at him. He looked back. The morning light was gray and rain waited outside the window, and the office was warm. And the coffee was exactly the temperature she preferred without her having told him. I haven't told you something, she said. I know. There's a chance, a real chance, not a doctor's reassurance, but an actual anatomical possibility that with the right surgical intervention, I could recover partial function. Maybe more than partial. He was still. The verospinal damage is extensive but not complete. There's residual signal. My own neurologist found it 18 months ago, and I told him not to pursue it. Why? She thought about how to answer that. Because I had spent 4 years building something that required me to be exactly who I was, and if the surgery failed, if I went through it, and it didn't work, I thought it would break something I couldn't rebuild. And now, she wrapped both hands around the coffee cup. Now, someone is trying to take the company from me anyway. So the math has changed. He leaned forward, elbows on knees. If you want, I can review the imaging. Tell you what I see. You're not licensed. I know what I'm looking at. She held his gaze. Then she opened the bottom drawer of her desk and set a manila folder on the surface between them. He opened it. He was quiet for a long time. She watched his eyes move across the imaging. His face doing the particular, focused thing it did when he was processing. This is from 18 months ago? He asked. Yes. You should have had surgery 14 months ago. I know. The window isn't closed, he said. But it's not wide open either. She nodded once. He closed the folder carefully. Set it back on the desk. Did not push. Did not offer a speech about hope or courage, or any of the words that people had been lobbing at her for 5 years. He said, "Tell me when you're ready. I'll be there." She looked at him. She thought, I have been very alone for a very long time. The video arrived on a Wednesday. It was sent to her private email, not her corporate address. But the one only 12 people had access to. 15 seconds of security footage, time-stamped 3 weeks prior, showing Ethan Cole entering a building on North Meridian Street at 9 p.m. That building, the accompanying message noted, was the registered address of Hale Capital Partners, Victor Hale's private investment entity. Beneath the footage, a single line. He has been working with Victor from the beginning. Amelia watched it 3 times. She knew about confirmation bias. She knew about manufactured evidence. She had spent 5 years in a world where information was weaponized as casually as furniture was rearranged. She knew all of that. And still, there was a specific kind of wound that reactivated old ones. She understood this in theory. She had read enough psychology in the sleepless months after the accident to understand how trauma recycled itself. Trust extended, trust broken, the body learning to treat all extension of trust as a precursor to the break. She understood the mechanism. Understanding a mechanism did not make it stop working. She thought about a man who had known, somehow, where her coffee cups were, who had come to her on a Saturday with 2 cups, already the right temperature, who had access to the billing system, to her floor, to her schedule, who had found the incriminating document with an efficiency that she had called methodical, and that she now asked herself whether she had only called that because she had wanted it to be that. She had let him in. That was the truth she kept turning over. She had let him in across every barrier she had maintained for years. And she had done it faster than she had allowed herself to acknowledge. And she had told herself it was controlled, supervised, strategic, that she was the one observing, the one with information advantage, the one in charge of what was permitted, when in fact she had simply wanted to believe in him and had constructed the architecture of analysis around that want. She thought about being alone for 5 years and what it had cost her, the accumulated weight of it, and how much she had wanted, not needed, wanted to believe that this one person was exactly who he appeared to be. The old fear was not of him specifically. It was of herself. Of the version of herself that wanted things and therefore became vulnerable to the people who offered them. She called her head of security at 10:47 p.m. "I need a termination action prepared for Ethan Cole. First thing tomorrow." A pause on the line. "Understood. And I need his building access revoked tonight." "Yes, Ms. Kane." She put the phone down. She sat in her apartment in the dark for a very long time. She did not review the video a fourth time. She already knew on the level below conscious thought, in the wordless place where people know things they cannot yet afford to know, that the footage was constructed. The timestamp was too clean. The angle was too useful. Real evidence of betrayal looked like confusion, not like a package. She knew, and she terminated him anyway, because the truth she could not yet say to herself was this: it was easier to be wrong about the evidence than to be right about herself. It was easier to say I was deceived than to say I let someone matter and I am terrified of what happens next. The first was a story about Ethan. The second was a story about Amelia Kane. And that story, she did not yet know how to survive. She had him escorted out in the morning. She did it publicly. Not cruelly. She was not cruel. She was careful. There was a difference, but there were witnesses, because witnesses made reversals impossible. And she needed it to be impossible. She needed to close the door. Ethan said her name once. Amelia. She had told him to call her by her name 2 weeks ago. The memory of that felt like something sharp. "Don't," she said. He looked at her face for a long moment. And she thought he was going to argue. And she readied herself for it. But he didn't. He nodded. Once. Slowly. The particular nod of someone setting something down carefully so it doesn't break, and walked out. Lily was in the pediatric wing for a follow-up appointment. Amelia did not go to see her. She went back to her office and sat in her wheelchair in the gray afternoon light and did not call anyone. The company moved on around her, as companies do. Victor moved fast once he thought the obstacle was removed. He called an emergency board meeting 2 days after Ethan's termination. He presented evidence of financial irregularities in the Pediatric Foundation, the anonymous authorization for Lily's surgery, traced and reattributed, reframed as embezzlement. He proposed a forensic audit and a temporary governance transfer. 4 board members voted in support. 3 hesitated. Amelia said nothing during the meeting. She watched Victor's face as he spoke, the measured delivery, the practiced regret, the particular performance of reluctance that people use when they intend to be blamed as little as possible for something they chose entirely, and she felt, beneath the cold analytical observation, something simpler, something that did not have a corporate language. She had trusted him. For years, she had trusted him. Not with her heart, she had been too careful for that, but with the thing that mattered more in her particular life. Her work, the hospital network she had built, the 40,000 patients it served annually, the pediatric fund. The oncology wing renovation, that was 3 months from completion. She had trusted him with all of it, had treated his presence as a structural feature of the institution rather than a variable within it, and he had spent 15 years stealing from her. Not money, which she had more of than she could spend in 2 lifetimes. He had stolen the clean version of the thing she'd built. The version in which everything was what it appeared to be. She understood, sitting in that boardroom, that she was angrier than she had been about anything in a very long time. Not the cold, managed anger she was accustomed to, the kind she used as a tool, but the other kind. The kind that came from somewhere that predated strategy. She had been wrong about Ethan. She had been catastrophically, willfully wrong. And she had known it the moment she made the call. She had known it, and done it anyway, because being wrong about something smaller felt survivable, and being wrong about something larger did not. She went back to her office and sat with that for 4 hours. Then her phone rang. It was Ethan. She almost didn't answer. She answered. "Lily's gone," he said. His voice was the flattest she had ever heard it. She was at the hospital for her follow-up. "She's gone." The world rearranged itself. "When?" she said. 2 hours ago. "I've called the police. They're a breath. They're treating it as a parental dispute. They think Claire, it's not Claire." A silence. "No," he said. "I don't think so either. They found her in 6 hours. Not the police. Not a search team. Amelia. Working through the hospital's server access, with a coldness that surprised even her, and Ethan, who knew Victor's operational patterns better than Victor knew he did. Victor had held 2 pharmaceutical trial sites under subsidiary names. One had been decommissioned the previous year. Its lease, however, hadn't expired. And its security camera system was still registered on the hospital network because no one had thought to remove it. Amelia pulled the feed. A storage room, climate-controlled. Lily, sitting against a wall, arms around her knees, visibly frightened but unharmed. A guard outside the door. "East Warehouse District," Ethan said, reading the address from the building registration. 12 minutes. "I'm calling the police first." "Yes." "Then we're going." "Yes." She said it and meant it. And he didn't question it, didn't treat it as bravado or remind her of practical limitations, just accepted her as the person she was saying she was. She had not been offered that in a very long time. The police entered first. Ethan and Amelia arrived behind them, and there were jurisdictional objections that Amelia ended with a single sentence, and the building was cleared in 11 minutes. Victor had not been there. He had, apparently, assumed the night would provide more insulation than it did. Lily ran to Ethan and buried her face in his chest and did not make a sound, which was somehow more frightening than crying would have been. Over Lily's head, Ethan looked at Amelia. She looked back. "I'm sorry," she said. The words felt inadequate to the scale of the error. She said them anyway. He shook his head slightly. Not dismissal, absolution. As though he had already moved past it. Was already in the next room. Had already decided that the only thing that mattered was the next hour. She wanted to tell him a lot of things. She said nothing. Because Lily was present. And some conversations require space that children should not have to hold. Victor was arrested at Logan Airport at 4:41 a.m. The charges included conspiracy to commit fraud, unauthorized medical intervention, obstruction of justice, and with the pharmaceutical data, Ethan had compiled evidence tampering in a medical licensing proceeding. The data went to the state medical board before the sun came up. The state medical board, to its credit, acted quickly. There would be proceedings. There would be committee reviews. But the investigative director called Amelia personally at 7 a.m. and said, "We're looking at the Goss case again." "All of it." She said, "I know what you'll find." He said, "I think we do too." She hung up. The hospital was beginning to wake around her. Morning shift. The ordinary machinery of care and attention, and the careful, persistent work of keeping people alive. She had built this place, or rebuilt it, or insisted it become something better than it had been. She sat in her wheelchair in the corridor where, months ago, she had told a stranger to stop pretending, and she looked out at the morning. Then she did something she had not done in 18 months. She called her neurologist. The surgery was scheduled 6 weeks later. In the intervening time, 3 things happened. First, Ethan Cole's medical license was reinstated. Not provisionally, not with conditions reinstated, with a formal letter from the state board acknowledging procedural failure and institutional negligence in the original proceeding. The letter was 3 paragraphs. It did not say "we're sorry," because institutions rarely do. But it said we were wrong. And for Ethan, after 7 years, that was enough. He read it in the pediatric ward, sitting beside Lily, who was drawing elaborate diagrams of what she planned to do when she was a veterinarian. He folded the letter carefully and put it in his pocket and looked at the ceiling for a moment. He breathed in through his nose. He thought about a version of himself at 27, standing in a hospital corridor, understanding that everything was ending and not knowing what came next. He thought about that person with something between grief and tenderness, not pity, recognition. Lily, without looking up from her drawing, said, "Good news?" "Yeah," he said, "good news." She nodded, satisfied, and returned to her veterinary schematics. Second, Amelia restructured the Kane Medical Group board, removed the 4 members who had supported Victor's governance motion, and appointed 2 physician researchers and a patient advocacy director to replace them. She made it public. She made it unambiguous. Several financial analysts described the restructuring as aggressive. She found she did not particularly mind. She also established the Lily Cole Cardiac Fund, not named for publicity, not named for sentiment, but named because when she had asked Lily what she wanted her legacy to be, Lily had thought about it with the seriousness of a philosopher and said, "I want other kids not to be scared like I was." Amelia had thought, yes, exactly that. The fund was capitalized at $40 million in its first year. Amelia made no announcement about where the seed capital came from. People speculated. She let them. Third, she told Ethan everything she hadn't told him. The details of the accident she had never shared with anyone. The specific night, 5 years ago, when she had driven home from the office with a preliminary audit report on her laptop that named Hargrove Therapeutics and 3 anomalous prescribing clusters and the intersection where everything had stopped. She told him in the hospital garden, on a Tuesday afternoon in early October, when the light had that particular quality of warmth that belongs only to days with no appointment on the calendar. The garden had been her project. She had insisted on it during the last renovation. A real garden with actual soil and seasonal plants and benches that were at the right height for someone in a wheelchair, though she had never publicly acknowledged that specific design consideration. He listened. He did not interrupt. He did not offer the phrases people reach for when they don't know what else to do. "That's terrible. I'm so sorry. I can't imagine." When she finished, he said, "You built all of this while carrying that. I didn't know what else to do." "Yeah," he said. "I know." They sat in the quiet for a while. A pigeon landed on the bench opposite them, reconsidered, and left. Somewhere beyond the garden wall, a delivery truck was maneuvering in the service lane, the ordinary sound of the world continuing regardless. "I was wrong about you," she said. "In the worst possible way. At the worst possible moment. You were working with incomplete information," he said. "You made the call you thought protected Lily. That's generous." "I'm not being generous. I'm being accurate." He turned to look at her. "You are possibly the least generous person I have ever met. It's one of the things I trust about you." She looked at him. He looked back. There was, in his face, the particular expression she had catalogued over months, not warmth, exactly, which could be performed, but something more structural. The look of someone who had decided to be present and meant it completely. "I would like to be there," he said, "for the surgery. If that's..." "Yes," she said. Before he finished the sentence, a beat. "Okay," he said. The surgery took 9 hours. Ethan waited. He brought Lily, who slept on a waiting room chair with her jacket as a blanket and her sketch pad open across her chest. And he sat beside her and read, and did not pace, and was in the way he was characteristically himself, simply present. The surgical attending, Dr. Patricia Wren, was 54 years old and had performed more than 300 spinal reconstructions. She had told Amelia, in their preoperative consultation, that the case was complex but not unprecedented, and that she preferred patients who asked specific questions over patients who deferred entirely to her. Amelia had asked 11 questions. "Doctor," Wren had smiled, not the reassuring performance of someone managing anxiety, but the genuine smile of professional recognition. At 11:47 p.m., Dr. Wren came out of the surgical suite still in her scrub cap. "Successful reconstruction of L1 L3, she said. "Better than we projected. Residual signal conversion was above the threshold we hoped for. She's going to have a long recovery." Ethan nodded. "But you should know," the surgeon said. "There's every reason to expect significant functional return. She'll work hard for it. But the architecture is there." He thanked her. He sat back down. He put his hand over Lily's without waking her. He looked at the ceiling for a while, at the fluorescent light and the acoustic tile and the ordinary institutional indifference of a hospital waiting room at midnight. He thought about 7 years of waiting rooms for hearings, for insurance reviews, for Lily's cardiac evaluations, for decisions made by institutions about his life. He had always sat in those rooms alone. He thought, not this one. The first steps came 3 months later. Not dramatic steps, not a triumphant crossing of a room, not a moment staged for anyone's observation. 2 steps, then 3, then 4, holding the rail of the parallel bars in the rehabilitation suite on the hospital's 3rd floor, with a physical therapist named Marcus who had the patience of geology and the specific talent for knowing when to encourage and when to simply wait. Ethan was there. He didn't make a sound. He just watched, with the particular stillness of someone witnessing something they have been waiting for, without admitting they were waiting. She made it to the end of the bars and turned around. He said, "How does it feel?" She considered the question seriously. She thought about the sensation, not comfortable, not clean. The complex protest of muscles that had been quiet for 5 years relearning their purpose, and she thought about the right answer, which was not about the physical sensation at all. "Like something I forgot I was allowed to want," she said. He crossed the room and she let him. And it was not a movie moment, no swelling music, no perfect lighting. Just the ordinary reality of 2 damaged people standing in a rehabilitation suite on a Tuesday morning, choosing, quietly and without theater, to be in the same place at the same time. She thought, this is what the other side of it looks like. Not healed, not fixed, just continuing. She thought, I'll take it. The last evening of that year, Lily sat at the kitchen table in the apartment Ethan had rented larger than the previous one, in a neighborhood with a park and a school 3 blocks away, and a coffee shop on the corner that Lily had already decided was her favorite, because the owner kept a bowl of dog biscuits by the door for the neighborhood animals and colored with great concentration, while Ethan cooked and Amelia sat at the table with a contract she was reviewing, her wheelchair folded and leaning against the wall with the ease of something that had found its proper proportion. She had been working on partial weight-bearing for 2 months. Some days were better than others. She had stopped tracking the averages because Marcus had told her that tracking averages was how people learned to be disappointed, and she had found this advice so unexpectedly correct that she had started paying him significantly more. Lily finished her drawing and pushed it across the table without preamble. It was 3 figures. A tall man with dark hair, a woman not in the wheelchair, standing, though the chair was in the background, small and incidental, and a small girl between them. Above them, in Lily's looping, deliberate lettering, "My family." Amelia looked at it for a long time. The woman in the drawing was standing. Lily had drawn her that way, without being asked, without knowing whether it would be true, as a simple statement of what she believed. 7-year-olds had a talent for confidence that most adults spent the rest of their lives trying to recover. From the kitchen, Ethan said, "Whatever she drew, don't encourage it. She'll be insufferable." "Too late," Amelia said. Lily looked up with her whole face that startling, sudden smile that collapsed her seriousness into pure delight and said, "Are you going to stay? For always?" Amelia set the drawing down carefully. She looked at Lily. She thought about the question with the seriousness it deserved, which was considerable. She had never answered a question this consequential, with anything less than precision. And she was not going to start now. "I live here now," she said. "Is that enough?" Lily thought about it, tilted her head, appeared to consult some internal framework for evaluating the adequacy of responses. "Yeah," she said. "That works." Outside, the city moved in its ordinary way, lights, traffic, the small collective hum of lives proceeding. Amelia could hear it through the window. She had always heard cities as demanding, as requiring something from her, presenting themselves as a problem to be solved. Tonight, it sounded like company. Ethan set a plate in front of her without asking if she was staying for dinner. Because she was staying for dinner, because this was where she was, and that had become, quietly and without announcement, a fact. She picked up her fork. The three of them ate. Outside, the city kept going, indifferent and alive. The way cities are full of people learning. Slowly and imperfectly and without sufficient credit. The hard and ordinary work of staying.